This is my domain 4 evidence for my professional portfolio. So domain 4, one component 4A is about reflecting on teaching, and the best evidence I have for that has to do with my Lehigh Valley Writing Project participation this year. My workshop unit that I did with my AP students was actually part of an inquiry project. So I actually wrote ultimately a 66-page inquiry paper. And that was pretty much all reflection. Of course, I had scrolled to the appropriate spot and now it's not showing up. So I've got to scroll back down. But for example, like obviously at the end I reflected on the data. You know, what did my beginning survey say? What did my end survey say? What does that mean? But also like when I was going through my implementation, even before I was finished with the implementation, I have these sections, you know, what didn't work. Up here was a section, what did work. For example, you know, I thought having the authentic audience was something really positive that I saw some results on. An example of something that didn't work is I felt like perhaps I had too many moving parts to this project. I gave students a lot of choice, and I feel like I maybe gave them a little too much choices. Maybe there were some things that I could have made simpler, while still sort of giving them the reins on other things. So that was an example of one thing that I would do differently next time. I reflected on, you know, I wish I had put more peer support into it. You know, they did give peer feedback at the end, but I think that should have happened earlier. So that's what I'd like to do before. And then, of course, at the end, my implications and conclusions, I take a look at all the data of what students said in the beginning and ending surveys. And I also ultimately looked at what the students said in their reflections, as you know, and what that meant, and how and why that was important. And I finally wrapped it up by just sort of reflecting on the process as a whole, and what I learned through it as an inquiry project about English class best practices. In domain 4, component 4B is about maintaining accurate records. A really good example of this is sort of the documentation that I kept during my inquiry project. Partly this was for my inquiry project because I needed evidence, but also like I really just needed to track what was going on. So this is an example of my block 3 class, and I'm starting over here on the first day of the workshop. Every day, students would fill in a Google form that populated this column. This was what they said they needed. Then I took notes on what we talked about that day. If I conferenced with them, what I told them, what they asked me. I noted if students were absent. This one just didn't fill out this checkout at the end of the day. And then at the end of the block, I also had them report back what they did today and what they plan to do for next time. This I went through day by day, and this was a ton of work. Filling it out, sort of tracking who I talked to about what. It helped me realize who I needed to talk to the next time. It helped me really sort of keep tabs, which there's no way I could have done. This document was a ton of work, but it was really the only way that I could keep track of who was where and what they needed from me and what I needed for next time. So for example, I actually would have, during the unit, if I needed to talk to this kid again next time, I would have made a note here, be sure to talk to next time, or be sure to comment after class. So these records were wildly helpful in my process. Component 4C is about communicating with families, and the best evidence for that is at the beginning of our unit, I wrote a really long letter, and I addressed it to both students and parents. And the students and I, they read it in class, and we talked about it, and I actually walked them through some of it and sort of demonstrated it. But the parents just got this via email. And I thought it was really important to explain what we were going to be doing, and first of all, the rationale. Why are we doing this workshop? What is workshop? What is the evidence for its effectiveness? And what am I trying to do here? Because I knew that there would probably be a little bit of anxiety about this. I also wanted to address, because I was going to go kind of gradeless with this. I wanted to explain to them that I wanted to give them feedback in the grade book, but I didn't want it to count, so I I called them excluded assignments, and therefore they didn't count to the final average, but it still gave them sort of progress feedback as we went along. But I really needed to be clear with parents and students about that beforehand. And also just kind of how this was going to figure into, okay, if we're going gradeless for a couple weeks, what is our third marking period grade going to look like? I knew my students and parents would be really concerned about that. So I tried to communicate all that up front. Students reacted well because we went over it in class and I made sure they read it and we talked about it. Parents, I didn't really get much response. I had one parent email me back and he was super excited about it. He said, "This sounds like an awesome project. Thank you for trying, to do something authentic." And he really recognized what we were trying to do, which was kind of cool. And finally, component 4D is participating in a professional community. This is not in any way related to my my building goal, but I do participate in professional development through a weekly Twitter chat, AP Lang chat, which I founded in 2014. And this is for AP Lang teachers. We chat weekly, and I actually hosted by myself for 3 years. And in this past year, I brought on some co-hosts. So I led a team, and this was our schedule for the year, for the spring semester, of who was hosting when, and we just went on a rotating basis. And each week, a different one of us came up with questions to engage in conversation. It's kind of hard to see. This is our chat feed right now. Because we're on the summer, we're not doing it weekly. It's all kind of very very informal, but here we've got somebody sharing professional development opportunities for this program. Here we've got people talking about the recent AP exam data that just came out. People sharing articles that would fit with some of our practice activities. So the chat is really cool because it's a constant feed of people talking about teaching this course. And I had a back channel chat with just the hosts, the women who were hosting with me. And this is where we would gather, and I would have to go back for quite a while to find us talking about anything chat related. But we would use this to kind of plan. Hey, it's my week to host. I'm thinking about this topic. What are we interested in? What do you think about my question ideas? Do you have anything to add? That kind of thing. So that has been not just sort of the overall professional development of the chat, but the talking through of the planning of it with other teachers has been really, really helpful. So, and that is it for my evidence for domain 4 of my portfolio.